Did you make her quit?
We must have. Yeah, we will excuse Maureen. She's actually at the Asea headquarters in Salt Lake doing some special work there for the company. But we welcome everybody from wherever you're coming out from around the planet to our Friday night Asea 5 webcast. This is global and it is awesome. And tonight we have a special guest, a returning favorite, Dr. Richard Michal, MD, from the great state. Is it North Carolina, Richard? Yes, where Duke is. He's a Duke graduate.
Yes.
He's a
We're
Duke
the Tar Heel
graduate.
State.
So
where did that name come from, Doctor?
Oh, I think that was from the Revolutionary War or something. You know, they put tar on them heels and they stood their ground in the fight in the battle.
Well, we'll fight in the battle tonight. We appreciate everybody coming on. Dr. Michal is a very esteemed physician. He recently kind of went into more of a concierge type practice mode, but he's been hanging around since I think 1983, which is kind of like me. It's a little bit older than dirt. And so we know a thing or two, and we welcome him. So let's get started. And I think it would be a nice introduction to remind and retell the story, Richard, of why you're here. What brought you to redox biology and health? What was it that captured your attention? And what keeps you here? Maybe you can kind of start with that and we'll throw other questions your way.
Well, real quick, Lee, before we do that, can you just go ahead, or Dr. Michal, can you go ahead and do the medical disclaimer, please?
Yes, absolutely. Well, and Lee, thank you for the intro. We're going to be talking about stuff that folks, what we're going to talk about tonight is some biochemistry. We're going to talk about something that is not a pharmaceutical agent, because quite honestly, if what we're going to talk about was a pharmaceutical agent, probably 98% to 99% of you you'd hang up. There wouldn't be a reason to really listen that intently. Certainly you'd have to ask your physician to prescribe it if you got interested in what you're going to hear about tonight. But this is a supplement, and as such, we can't make claims that it cures, diagnoses, treats, or prevents any diseases. But I will say this, it caught my attention through a medical challenge that somebody in my family had. And I think that that's a good way to kind of maybe get into this story a little bit. So I'll go ahead and start there. As Lee said, I've been a very, very busy practitioner, classically trained, went to undergraduate at Chapel Hill. So there's the Tar Heel connection. Then I did actually change one shade of blue to another, went to Duke for my medical school training, went to a 3-year residency in family medicine, and actually started a faith-based practice in Rocky Mount. And I've been here my entire career, which is very unusual to stay in one place, but it's been a very accepting community, and we've been blessed. And as Lee also said, did that for over 35 years and decided rather than to hang up the shingle, I'm doing a concierge practice now. And actually, it's been quite amazing. Because I have more time with patients now. We have more time to explore options other than just pharmaceutical options. And it truly is amazing when you start to do some of the testing that we're doing in my practice. We're detecting underlying diseases and conditions that really are there, but they're asymptomatic. And it's amazing when you start checking inflammatory markers, other things that you start getting these red signals going up on the dashboard, and it indicates that there are underlying issues going on that even the patient and even other doctors aren't aware of. So,
hey, real quick, explain asymptomatic real quick, doctor.
Yeah,
I know what it is, but just for the people out there, what is asymptomatic? Because we hear that out there a lot.
Sure. Good question, Jim. Asymptomatic basically means no symptomatology associated with the disorder or with the challenge. I could use an example of that we see all the time, plaque buildup in arteries. Plaque is, you can think of plaque as a soft little bubble inside inside a blood vessel. And, these can happen over time. And certainly the end result of a plaque, unfortunately, is if it ruptures, it can cause leakage of very noxious things into the bloodstream, and it can actually bleed. It's kind of like think of yourself having a cut on your finger, except it's inside a blood vessel. And when you have that happening inside a blood vessel, think about a clot, a scab forming. Well, that's fine on your finger or your hand, your wrist. But if it's inside a blood vessel, folks, that could be a heart attack or a stroke happening. So, but it starts with something that has no symptoms at all. It's just this little bubble. And that little bubble, if it stays stable, is one thing. But if it becomes inflamed or it starts to grow, and it's kind of like a bubble that grows, it can thin the cap. And then all of a sudden, you've got this disastrous thing going on. And, people that have sudden events, we call them cardiovascular events, they think, well, gosh, when did that happen? How did that happen? He's only 40 something. He's only 50 something. She's only 50 something. Where did that come from? Well, it comes from a process that is subtle and actually causes no symptoms in the beginning. If you do the proper testing, you may get clues. And that's the fun part about the practice that I'm doing now. And we have time to talk to people about lifestyle change, which is incredibly important. But let me go ahead. So that's what asymptomatic kind of means.
Well, real quick on that point, are you seeing people coming in younger and younger with being asymptomatic? And if so, why do you think that is?
Wow. Okay. Yes, you're going to get me on a soapbox now. Okay.
Well, that's why we have you on here. We love your soapboxes.
Sure. Okay. The youngest person that I've detected with plaque building up in the carotid arteries are very easy to image. So they're accessible. You can access them. It's non-invasive, but it's a reproducible test. And we're looking at the thickening of the inner wall of the artery there. The youngest person, because of other signals that we picked up on, asymptomatic, no symptoms, though 26 years of age. Now I got a bunch of mid-30s. Now you're thinking, my gosh, that's so young. The good news is they have time to correct these things, to not grow them. In our part of the world, we have growing season right now. If you want to grow a tomato and have it produce something, you do a lot to help that tomato grow, that tomato plant. You give it sunlight, water, fertilizer. There's lots of things that go into making that plant produce. And with plaque buildup in the arteries, it's the leading cause of death in our country, cardiovascular, right? Okay. So, it affects a lot of people potentially. And what we want to do with each and every person that I see is I want to starve that plaque. I don't want to give it stuff to grow. Okay. So, you starve it of certain things, and then you're enhancing other things. And what we're finding is that, it's kind of like rowing a canoe, paddling on both sides of the canoe. You want the right paddle and the left paddle. And in my right hand, I might use pharmacologic things. In my left hand, I'm using things like we talked about earlier, supplements, lifestyle, tremendous abilities to affect the course of that canoe. And instead of going down the falls when you're 25, 35, 45, 50, maybe it's when you're 85, 95, But right now, some of these canoes are headed down the falls. And it's our chance to say, wake up, wait a minute, look at where the current is going. It's taking you down a path you do not want to go. And so I think tonight what we're going to explore, honestly, is one side of the canoe, and it's a side that's often neglected and not appreciated, and that's the non-pharmacologic side. And I'll admit to you now, classically trained, listen, I wrote prescriptions for over 35 years, and I honestly didn't have time to look at something like what we're going to talk about tonight. I had no chance to. Working 14-hour days, 6 days a week, then even before church, after church on Sunday. I mean, I was on a treadmill. It wasn't a good place to be. And, doing that for as many years, I was wearing out. And, but life happens. And 2 days, this is 4 years now ago, almost, call came for my daughter. We had just seen her family for Christmas. Wonderful time. 2 days later, I'm getting ready to see my first patient in the morning. And I'll never forget the call. I feel the call from her. She says maybe 2-3 sentences about one of her kids, Gideon, and at the time he was 13 years of age. And she gets about 2 or 3 sentences out. I say, honey, let me interrupt. You need to get him in the car right now. You need to drive as fast as you can safely drive him to the nearby pediatric emergency room, which is 15, 20 minutes from their house, and get him there now. Get him there now. She did that. Within 2 hours, after some preliminary tests, they had transferred him to my alma mater, Duke. Now, folks, you do not want to be the star patient at a university teaching hospital, because if you are, that means nobody knows what you have. Everybody wants to beat everybody out in terms of finding out what it is, because nobody else on the teams can find it out. But you don't want to be that person. Well, he was for 5 weeks. And at the end of the day, honestly, he had major challenges. I would put them in a kind of a sense of, even though he was 13, he almost acted kind of like, somebody who had a stroke, kind of. He couldn't swallow, he couldn't walk well at all, and he couldn't speak. So he had some brain challenges.
Yeah, was he really active prior to all of this?
Oh yeah.
I mean,
he was a cross-country runner. He was extremely active, brilliant young guy. So just a dramatic change. And in fact, Duke really, they did their level best. They did everything they could. They even went out to where they lived, took soil samples. They did everything. And basically they couldn't come up with a causative situation, and they had no treatment plan, really, just rehab and hope that he gets better. So that's where they were for the next several months, because there was no traditional answers. They started looking on the internet. They started looking at all sorts of supplements. I call it, lotions, potions, and contraptions. They did all sorts of things. They're running out of money. And so about that time, through providential, one person telling another person, Asea found its way to them. Redox signaling molecules found its way. It stayed in their pantry, I found out, for at least several weeks, but finally they pulled it out because nothing's working. And within 3 to 4 weeks, amazing things started happening for Gideon. And it was profound. And I'll fast forward to my connection with that. So we were going to have a birthday party. They have a family of 10 kids. So, you're always going to have a birthday party at some point in the year. And we were celebrating a couple of the kids' birthdays. And she told me, Anna said, hey, look, Dad, something's helping Gideon. I can't believe it, but it is. Would you mind hearing about it? And I said, no, why would I mind hearing about it? So we go to the birthday party, and Ed and Rebecca Weens were there. Now, I never met them. And Paula and Fred Logis were there. And I knew them. And then this guy, Dr. Dick Walker, was on the screen up there, and he zoomed in. And so I heard about this redox signaling science. And, you know, it was mentioned several times. And I'll remember sitting on the sofa where I would always play with my grandkids, except I sunk really deep into that sofa because I didn't want anybody to ask me about this science. Because quite honestly, as Dr. Osler said, we're not young birds, we're old birds. And all this science explosion in redox signaling science has really happened in the last 15 or so years, okay? And when you're a busy practitioner, you're busy. If you're not in academic medicine doing, you know, research, I just didn't have time to look at basic sciences. Just didn't, you know? And so, but I'm going to tell you, that evening, I decided several things. Number one, and I heard about this network marketing stuff, and I didn't really understand that. And I tucked that away, put a little bookmark on it. But what I did come away with was, number one, my grandson was improving when nothing, and my traditional medicine had no answers. And I felt impotent as a grandpa, but also a doc. I had felt impotent up to that point, and I could see he was improving. Things were happening. Okay. And number two, it involved a science. And I thought, whoa, well, it involves some science. That's interesting. Now, I didn't know anything about this science. So I spent, you know, I felt like Paul. I went off into hibernation a little bit. And for the next 3 or 4 months, I just kind of bought textbooks and started reading about this as much as I could. And I just came away just really, I guess, mesmerized, flabbergasted, you know, like, wow, why, how something this important, how could I not have kept up with this? But, you know, again, we're all very busy practitioners. And that's something for everybody on this call to understand. You know, if your doc is brand new out of their training, you know, 5, 6, 7 years, they just graduated from the residency program, you know, then they're going to know something about redox signaling molecules. But if they're much older, folks, we have lives to live, and we're not going to be steeped in basic science unless we have a need to be there, okay? But I felt this need because of what happened in my kids' lives, my grandkids' lives. So honestly, that's how I got started in this. Now, I've grown in my knowledge of this field of biochemistry. We were talking on the call beforehand. I'm dealing with somebody who's having it's a colleague who's having difficulties with one of the big things that's going around right now. And it's amazing that the scientific field that has nothing to do with this product, but the mechanisms of what's going on is right in the line of the inflammatory pathways in our bodies, how the cells are kind of being flipped over and not recognizing certain things. They're overreacting to some things. It's just fascinating to me. So, you know, this is a field of science that is absolutely astounding. We're on the tip of an iceberg in terms of knowledge base. And for those that are on this call and you can see the background, look behind Dr. Osler. You see that book back there? That Redox Matters book. That's a book that I purchased just a little while ago. And I'm loving it, by the way, Dr. Lee. I'm going to let you know. It's excellent. And but at any rate, you know, this is a field of science that is exploding. If there are any grad students or wannabe grad students on the call tonight, you need to do something in the redox field, because, you know, there are going to be more Nobel Prizes there. So That's probably more than you want to know about my story, but it's heartfelt. And now let me just mention, because that was a few years ago, right? Let me fast forward to today. This young man, Gideon, and his other siblings, by the way, had other manifestations of tick-borne illness and challenges, and they responded quite nicely as well. But just this past fall, they're homeschooled, and they were in the nationals competition in the United States for homeschoolers for cross country. And his brother beat him, but his brother is like college fodder. All the college coaches want his older brother to run for them in college. But I'm going to tell you, Gideon, he was in the top 5, I know, in the country in his age group. So to go from where he was to being able to do that is absolutely outstanding, amazing. I'm so blessed that somebody introduced him to this, something that I knew nothing about. But folks, you could also introduce friends that may have challenges to it too, and you don't need to write a prescription for it.
That's right.
Dr. Michal, how long did it take you to get comfortable with Redox, for you to either talk to other people, or do you need to be a doctor to really understand this? Do we need to read the Redox Matters book? And then Lee, maybe in a moment you can share what these molecules are. Dr. Michal, how do you explain simply, if I'm your patient, we're your patient coming in, how do you explain this to somebody? In your words, then Lee, you give your angle.
Sure. Well, the good news is you don't have to be, do I have to know the mechanics and the aerodynamics of a plane or starting a car for me to tell somebody, hey, I think you ought to hop a car, and that's a good model over there, and you can trust a car to get you from point A to point B. You don't have to walk that distance. You don't necessarily have to bike that. Or, if you want to take a plane, I don't have to know how necessarily the plane works. I just trust that the plane works, and I've seen it work. So I'm not trying to dumb this down at all. I think Dr. Lee's book is incredibly well written, even for the layperson. It's a very nice book. And just like any science book, there are times where it gets a little bit hairy, but we have to have our nomenclature in our fields, right? But you don't have to go and read tons of books. I would say that you just have to have a desire to help people. And the great thing about this particular form of redox we call Asea, in both a liquid and a gel format, is that it is not toxic. There is no toxicity that we've seen with this product. And there's no drug-drug interactions. One of the things that takes up a lot of time, in fact, I was doing this just about an hour ago. I had to call in a prescription for somebody, and I actually had to play with drug-drug interactions on a computer to make sure there was nothing that they were already taking along with this new medication. Well, you don't even have to play around with that with this. And so it's really such a it's such a no-brainer in some ways, really, to be able to recommend something that's basically, folks, these molecules are native to our body, okay? In the sense that we're making redox. Now, some of us are doing a better job of that. The functionality of our redox may be differing. And we have to think about the challenges that are external to us. I'd like to see that raise of hands. Who on this call tonight eats a perfect diet? From a perfect food source, perfect food source, you've documented that food source is perfectly organic, perfectly maintained, and so forth. There aren't too many people that continue to do that on a regular basis? Who on this call exercises regularly? We know that exercise can, oh, we've got one in the audience. There we go. But seriously, I mean, lifestyle is very hard to do. And we're inundated by things from the outside. So we've got all these external stresses. And quite honestly, an imbalance is brought up eventually. Now, in Gideon's case, even though he was maxing his natural production of redox around his age, 13, he had an incredible external stress that inundated his system. Okay. And he needed help after that to correct those imbalances. So, signaling, gosh, how do you get across signaling? I've used cell phones before. So the audience, I mean, a lot of people, I'm sure just about everybody on this audience has a cell phone, and it's a great technology, right? Weather forecasts, look at radar, you can look at sports scores, news, talk to your friends around the world. It's an amazing piece of technology in your hand. But if you have 4 bars of signal, what happens if you go down to 1 bar of signal? Now this incredible technology is somewhat limited. And in fact, it may become almost not useful to you. So you have to have this working piece of instrumentation, but without signal to augment what it's got built into it already, it's going to have difficulties performing to its capabilities. And I think, in a very simplistic way, we can look at our cells that make up our organs and the organ systems. And, we can look at these cells and say, are they getting the signal, the proper signaling to do their jobs in an optimal way? And whatever the function of the cells is, whether it's cells in your liver, cells in your brain, cells in your kidneys, it doesn't really matter, because the biochemistry, it requires good signaling to optimally function. And so, I guess in a simplistic way, Jim, you don't need to be a rocket scientist, a nuclear physicist, maybe to have come up with this stabilized thing. You needed to be one, but not to tell other people about it. So if people can understand the importance of signal with a cell phone, that's one way to look at this. So now for me as a practitioner who is steeped in wanting to know, and I like to know backgrounds and so forth, it took probably 3 to 4 months before I really started to understand this better. But folks, you can share this, right? You could share this tomorrow with somebody, because you could just point them in the direction of some helps, some videos. And I can tell you, this stuff is incredible.
That's awesome.
Lee, can you explain real quick? And then Ann's got a couple questions for Richard, but Lee, can you, in your words, when Richard said it's native, what does that mean? When he says that there's no toxicity, what does that mean to the average person? What are these little molecules?
Yeah, those are all great questions. I'd like to start with the idea of how does your body, how does any cell in your body know that it's in trouble? We live in an environment that has all kinds of insults and dangers around it. And part of the whole idea of having an immune system is to protect ourselves from things going on in the world and physiological issues that are going on with our own body. So again, the question, when there's something bad, when there's hypoxia, when there's toxicity, when there's malnutrition, or when there's a disease or anything like that, how does a cell know, what does it do to trigger some kind of an alert so that it can respond, appropriately? And that is really the essence of redox biology. The whole redox landscape, or the whole redox spectrum, if you will, is about essentially, and I don't want to blow people's minds with chemistry, but it's about the movement of electrons from one molecule to the next molecule. This is what Krebs cycle means when we say the mitochondria is the power plant that creates energy in our body. And when Krebs cycle, when the mitochondria is functional, we're creating energy, but we're also creating redox molecules. That's what we mean by they're native to the body. For decades, we didn't know that. We were taking antioxidants and emphasizing, plant nutrition to put out the free radicals or these redox molecules that was created in the making of that energy, thinking that would save us from disease. And it does, but we didn't recognize until really about the turn of the century, the millennium, that these have a dual role. And the other side of the canoe, as Dr. Richard talked about, is that they have a role in signaling the cell to mount a response and to be appropriately balanced when these threats come along. And so that is really what signaling messengers or redox signaling molecules do, is help relay or convey situational awareness of when things go wrong, when I'm under stress, when I'm sick, when I'm exposed to something. How do I mount a response to that? And it is all redox signaling. We call it the interactome. That's kind of a big word, but it just means all the interactions that go on in a cell through all its metabolic pathways, and how my body can respond to that. And Dr. Richard does a great job of talking about the blending of that. We're not talking about stepping away from conventional medicine. That would be foolhardy, because all of us have things that sometimes have to be managed that way or are being managed that way. But the point here is, as my cell corrects itself, if I can replenish and put these native molecules back to work, if we can, as I call it, awaken the inner doctor and make that functional again, then I may need these interventions that we provide as health professionals less and less and less, because I'm able to carry the weight of the problem better. I mean, he talked about symptomology or symptoms earlier. When you think about it, there's a phrase I use, and it's not mine, it's borrowed, but health is more than the absence of symptoms. When I have symptoms, I wake up and I go, gee, I have a symptom. I need to run to the doctor and get this symptom taken care of. Well, okay, so a smoke alarm just went off in my house. Why would I go over and turn off the smoke alarm and then go back to bed? That's a symptom. It's telling me there's something going on. I need to investigate and find out what went wrong that activated that alert or that alarm. That's the symptom or the sign. And rather than just turn it off, say with a drug, and I'm not saying categorically this is right or wrong, but rather than that just being everything I do, why not ask a different question? Say, why is that activating? Could it be that there's smoke in the room? Could there be a processing error in the mechanism of how my cell's functioning that's creating this downstream disease state that then is going to require more and more intervention because I'm not correcting it upstream enough? And that's really the whole essence of what redox signaling is about. We just simply have found, call it crack the code, discovered, whatever you want. We found a way to take and mimic the saltwater chemistry. People have this thing, well, it's just salt water. Well, yeah, you're all salt water. That's what the mitochondria has access to. That's where it makes these signaling molecules from, is the sodium and the chloride and the hydrogen and the oxygen and the nitrogen. And there's a very sophisticated metabolic pathway inside Krebs cycle in this redox platform that uses saltwater chemistry. And that's what we're supplying in a replenishing vehicle that now it's like sticking the gas nozzle in the car tank and you're filling it up again. It now can run more completely because I'm replenishing its ability to function like it did when it was working well when I was younger. So that's kind of, again, I call it's kind of a high flyover, but it's answering the question, how does a cell know when it's in trouble? And what is it going to do when the alarm goes off? How does it respond to that? And how can it auto-correct on its own by waking up that inner doctor and getting upstream in the process?
Thank you, Lee.
Yeah, that was great. I have a couple comments and then a question for you, Doctor. So I was thinking about, when people see runners or people who work out and they're going, at it strong, that didn't come like overnight. It took us time to train and to get to that point where our heart is strong enough, lungs are stronger. Obviously, Asea plays a big part in the ability to run stronger, longer, faster. But if you take the opposite of it with the people's conditions, many of these didn't come overnight. They built up to where that person is. And so when you're getting on Asea, or maybe somebody here is brand new, you got to give it minimum 90 days to see 75 trillion cells regenerate. And some issues that you may have had for a decade, you might want to give it a year. So you got to give enough time to be able to see the body heal itself. And you were talking about not having, working 14 hours, not having any time to study anything remotely alternative, or I don't know how much you were doing before Asea, but based on what I've heard from other doctors, they don't learn anything about alternative or functional, or all they know is, at least in Jim's case, all those doctors knew is prescribe. That's all his lifestyle was for 25 years. And our lifestyle today is radically different. We have no pharmaceutical at all in the house for anything. And so, if we go outside and get bit, we know what we're doing. If we go outside and get hurt, we know what to do. And same with a burn in the kitchen or whatever. And so it's a shame that doctors are not learning about it sooner, so they can maybe give people a choice. And it takes, unfortunately, sometimes a family member challenge to finally, maybe there is something else out there. Maybe I don't know everything. And that's what I wish is more of them would know, that there is more than one option to give a loved one or a patient. But my question for your grandson is, if you were seeing such remarkable results in 3 weeks, I'm just going to assume that there was no less than 4 ounces a day, more likely 8 ounces, just because that's what I saw with Jim. He saw, immediate results, or he saw results fairly quick with 8 ounces. Was that the amount? Do you know if that was the amount they started from day one for 3 weeks where you saw a change? Were you?
It's my understanding, talking to my daughter, that they actually started, I think, more slowly, 2 to 4 ounces.
Okay.
And then they did eventually ramp it up. Now, I think now he is actually taking half a bottle a day, 16 ounces a day. But they were worried he had lots of different challenges from those ticks, and lots of different potential etiologies running around in his body. And so they didn't want to just, even with this product, they didn't want to, I guess she would have used the word detox, perhaps.
Yeah.
They were worried about that. So I think they actually started him with 2 ounces a day, and then built up to 4. I'm not sure exactly when they went up to 6 to 8, but I think the great thing here is that, and we know that even from the pharmacology side of things, that there's a dose response relationship, but it's individualized. And so I'll take the same principles that we find there, and it applies to even this supplement. It is that, the aha moment, folks, don't look for this to be aha within a week, because you'd be in the vast minority. I mean, 15%, as powerful as what Dr. Osler said this is. only about 15% of users will have that moment in a week of using it. Okay. Now, it's great if you're that 15%, right? You have validation early. Hey, I can take this stuff. It's the wow. But you're in the 15% minority. Okay. By a month, it's probably more like 50%. But, if you stop it at 1 month, it's like a lot of the medicines I prescribe, quite honestly. Again, other than maybe antibiotics, which can have a rapid response that's visible and measurable, most of the things we do take at least a month. And many of the things that I use pharmacologically, I ask the patient to bear with us for 2 to 3 months before we can see a measurable effect. So again, getting back to the Asea story, at 2 months of usage, your response rate is probably, around 75%. People will say, my goodness, this is helping my X, Y, and Z,
Yeah.
and by 3 months, it's probably about 90%. Now, 90 is not 100.
Right.
90 is the vast majority of people. But you have to remember that 90 is not 100. Okay.
Yeah.
And if you have major challenges, number one, this is not toxic, as we've said. It's not, there's no drug interactions. You should stay with it. As great as this is, we cannot direct this to go to my, whatever the organ system is, it seems most challenged for me.
Right.
It might be your brain, your heart, your liver, your kidneys, your musculoskeletal, it could be a number of different challenges. And, we as individuals always rank our challenges, 1 through 10. We can't tell these things where to go.
Right.
Only the good
Now,
Lord.
I had one more question.
Yeah. So go ahead. But
one more question about grandson. So in those 3 weeks of changes, were you seeing cognitive? Were you seeing where he was better motor skills? Were you seeing him have a better appetite? I'm assuming he was verbally saying things he was seeing change. Your mom was seeing the change. Maybe you can describe adjective wise some of the things that he saw.
Right. His locomotive skills, ability to walk, was, markedly improving. Verbal skills were improving. His ability to swallow, things that we just take for granted, really, honestly. I mean, here's a kid who had to get a feeding tube placed in his stomach before he left his hospital care. So, these things came back cognitively, high executive skill levels. That took a lot longer. And so, so not everything came along at the same time.
Yeah.
So again,
That's great.
I think I try to encourage people to really consider that, make your list of all your challenge areas. I think that's a good thing to have. When people come in to see me, I like them when they have their list because, they're organized and you can track things. And honestly, tracking your challenges on a weekly and a monthly basis is really good because that way you can somewhat take a little bit of the subjectivity out and your own case, but you're using your own baselines and you're tracking this and your response rates, and it's going to be different in different areas.
Okay, now I'm an ex-stockbroker, and I immediately, when I always heard the 90% in 90 days, my brain goes, yeah, what about the 10%ers? So we know this works every time. My biggest fear, guys and gals, is that people don't take this seriously. They get on it for a month or two or a week or 2 or 3, and they go, hey, your grandson felt it quickly. I didn't. It didn't work on me. Maybe it worked on him. How do you convey this works 100% of the time? And we try to prepare people. This is a life choice. This isn't get better and quit choice. So how do you guys explain this is a life choice? Now, maybe that can overwhelm people to think, oh my gosh, I got to do this and that every month. But what's your health worth? Maureen will always say that until you lose it, you don't really value what your health is. So any thoughts on that, guys?
Dr. Osler, you want to handle that one first?
Yeah, I'll take a stab at it. I remember asking or hearing people ask Dr. Avi Hershowitz, does this work? And he looked at us and said, well, it depends on how you define the word works.
Yeah.
We have this pharmaceutical mindset, modern medicine mindset that's in our culture that, for a narcotic pain medicine to work, my pain has to go away. And if the discomfort doesn't resolve, then the medication doesn't work, And so we come at this with the same paradigm, and we're thinking, well, I need to see demonstrable shifts or changes in how I present to the world or feel or whatever. Otherwise, it doesn't work. And I counter that with this works 100% of the time. Redox signaling is what we call pleiotropic. That's a science word that means one to many. It's across the broad spectrum. And this explains why people that are using these redox activators, it explains why we have so many varied stories. For one person, it's about their brain. Another person, it's about a joint or their heart or their skin or whatever, their attitude, their mindset, their view on life, the sharpness of the way they think, the way their bowels work. I mean, everybody's got a different presentation, which is appropriate with what a foundational thing like this is all about. This is at the epigenetic level that's telling the genetic level when to turn on and when to turn off and how to be regulated. And so this is always working. And I go back to, Jim's thought about what about the 10%? And you could take that and just say, well, the 100%, this is about prevention. If I were to take a handful of vitamins, just go to the shelf and I've got these antioxidants and vitamins and minerals and so forth. Do I take them with the idea that by Tuesday I'm going to feel better and walk without pain in my joint type of thing? No, that's not why I take vitamins. That's not why I try to eat right. That's not why I'm exercising or should exercise. Those lifestyle things, those are all what we call biooxidative. They enhance my mitochondrial function, which makes more redox signaling molecules, which makes all these pathways work better. So they always work. Whether or not I can point to a body part and say, wow, look at that, or let me describe how it's different now or not, that's a whole different, it's a whole different thing. So in that regard, we need to look at this as anti-aging. There's a whole field of medicine out there called anti-aging medicine, which is how do I make my health span be equal to my lifespan? Or am I going to start dying when I'm 60, when I really am going to actually die at 79? But if I start dying seriously when I'm 60, but yet people like Dr. Michal can show up with interventions that keep me alive and replace bad joints and bad heart valves or whatever it is through medical interventions, then I have good health. And it's like, no, you don't. You're just, we put Humpty Dumpty back together long enough and well enough that you can waddle off from your bed to the bathroom every day. That's not living. And so that's part of my answer to this. It always works.
Yeah, I agree.
Dr. Michal?
You're muted.
I didn't do it. He did.
Yeah.
There we go.
No, I would concur with Dr. Osler on much of what he said there. And, remember that, again, measurements of success, and I think that's one of his primary things he was mentioning was, how do you measure success? And I think that we need to be very careful with that. This is helping you in many, many different ways. It's wonderful when your top 2 or 3 on your list get checked off. But there's a concept of area under the curve, and I just need to kind of bring that topic up for a second. If you have had if your cells have been in what we would call a stressed, oxidative stressed state for a long period of time, it may take you a very long period of time to correct that. You know, I don't think that when I said we're on the cusp of a lot of knowledge in this area of redox, I think that's one of the areas. I mean, you know, what about area under the curve? I mean, you know, we know, I'll take an example that's very common. Diabetes is a disease that's rampant in our population. Why is it rampant now? Well, it's the form that is rampant is lifestyle mediated. Okay. And the question earlier on the program was, you know, why do we think these things are happening externally? Well, you know, quite honestly, in our culture, we get in cars, we don't ride bicycles, we don't walk to places. Our exercise is minimal, and our food supply is maximal, and we can have anything we want at any time of the day we want to eat it. And, you know, much of what we eat is not good for us. And so, you know, you've got this colliding of bad factors coming in from external sources, and we're saying, sure, I'll buy into that. I'll buy into that. And before you know it, we have these things going on, and slowly a person's becoming, we'll use a medical term, insulin resistant. We won't go into that, but basically it's another term could be used as kind of pre-diabetic. It's smoldering underneath the surface. If you do the right kind of testing, you can detect this early on. And then if a person doesn't change their lifestyle, their pancreas will get worn out. Think about running a business and you're telling your employees, work overtime, work overtime, work overtime, work overtime, work overtime. Finally, they're quitting. They're out of your business. You know, they couldn't take it. Well, if your pancreas quits, folks, then your blood sugar jumps up like crazy and you have a whole nother mess to deal with. So this is a process that happens, and it's an accumulative effect over a period of time. So it's area under the curve. And honestly, you know, as good as redox is in many ways, I just have to point out as a practitioner, it doesn't tie your sneakers.
Yeah.
So, you know, you better take stock of drinking lots of water, getting lots of good restorative sleep, getting exercise as appropriate to your condition. I mean, there's both sides of the canoe that I like to row on. And, you know, but to neglect the supplement side, as is evidenced by redox now, you know, I think we're doing a disservice to ourselves to not look at this very, very, very carefully, because it's not all about pharmacology. It's about our lifestyle. It's about what we put into our bodies, the stressful situations. And again, area under the curve. And I'm going to tell you, you know, if you have a lot of area under the curve, either you're older or you've done a lot of not so great stuff to your body, you know, it may take you a long time to get your parameters back to where they should be. But, you know, the great thing is that I have seen with augmentation, I would say augmentation of a person's health. Dr. Osler talked about health, not just the actual chronological age. What is your health? How is your health span? You know, to be able to utilize something as basic as redox biochemistry at a basic level, I mean, to be able to have people be able to reduce their medications because of the augmentation effect of redox is just, it's wonderful, because I get the chance to do that. You know,
Yeah.
it's fascinating. And, you know, people, was mentioned earlier, you know, you kind of like your outlook can change. Well, if you feel like exercising, you might actually exercise. And when you actually exercise, wonderful things can happen. But, you know, a lot of people just don't, they feel so sluggish and they just can't get there, you know, and it hurts every time I exercise. So I'm not going to do it anymore. So I think that this is just absolutely astounding. It's a tremendous breakthrough in health sciences, and it was a dark thing that brought me to it, but at the end of this day, it's a bright thing. It's a bright thing in my family's life, and it's just a privilege to be able to share the concepts with people. So I appreciate everybody's attention.
Yeah, I agree. I agree with all you said. And I think people too many times sabotage the abilities of the redox signaling to work. It's not like a magic potion. Poof, everything's gone. There are, like you said, lifestyle changes, and people should challenge themselves on getting rid of things that affect your serotonin. There's very specific things that cause the serotonin to get worse. There's certain things you can do different for better sleep. Certainly exercise, even if you just do, 3 times a day, 30-minute walks.
A week.
I meant a week, sorry. All those things, less GMOs, less processed food, all those things, like you said, good clean water, that's just going to improve. Dr. Ward used to always say that. Sleep more, exercise, water, you're going to see the whole redox journey get that much better. So appreciate your time today.
Yeah. But at the end of the day, guys, where I was in my story, I had no hope. I was 58 years old and I was on 4 different medications, Dr. Michael, and I still don't know if anybody really in my medical team really looked at how those meds interacted with one another. But at 58 years old, I didn't have any hope. I had nerve damage in my leg. My back was killing me all the time. And I had gained weight because I couldn't, like exactly what you said, I couldn't exercise. But someone shared this with me. Kind of, it was a bad situation with my best friend, and they shared it with me because of what it did to their son. And now we look at what we're doing and what you're doing, Dr. Michael, and what Dr. Osler is doing with his amazing gift back to society, to people with Redox Matters, and being able to help explain to people how big this is. How big is this? Real quick, we got literally 1 minute, Dr. Michael. How big is this? I know you kind of reiterated that a little bit, but how massive is this breakthrough?
Honestly, I know it's huge. It's an understatement. I won't be around. I'll be in heaven, but say 25 years from now, when the breakthroughs are continue to come, I know we're going to know more about redox biochemistry. I know we're going to have more answers. We're going to have more revelations than we even have now. So it's huge. It's coming, and everybody should pay attention.
And just think of all the lives you're going to change because you keep sharing it with people. You keep sharing it with people you love, care about.
It's right timing.
So, guys, thank you so much. Dr. Michael, as always, thank you. I love your shirt. Dr. Lee, your shirt's kind of boring.
I know.
Sorry, man. What can I say?
Hey, we're warriors for redox, man.
I got the blue.
It's our we like
all right, guys. We've got Dr. Aaron Kaufman. We got Dr. Kaufman with us next week. Donalyn Dominguez was going to be next week, but we had to bump her back. She actually had a funeral to plan for next week. So we flip-flopped. So we'll have Dr. Aaron Kaufman next week, and then Donalyn Dominguez, midwife extraordinaire. So guys, thank you so much. We love and adore you. We will have the Vimeo copy of this available on Asea United tomorrow. So if you need that, you want that to be able to share it with your loved ones, please do get it there. Thank you, guys. God bless.
Bye.
Thank you, docs.
Thanks.